Tunde Anabayo stood at the floor-to-ceiling glass window of his penthouse in Abuja, watching the city slowly come alive beneath. Also rock. The evening lights blinked on one after another, spreading across the streets like tiny stars. From this height, everything looked calm and controlled, as if life itself could be managed from above. At 34, Tunde had the kind of life newspapers liked to celebrate. He was the founder of a fast-growing education technology company, a regular guest on television shows, and a name investors trusted. People called him brilliant, focused, unstoppable, yet standing alone. In the quiet apartment, none of those words reached him. The penthouse was beautiful, but cold. Polished stone floors reflected the soft lighting. The furniture was expensive, but carefully spaced, as though comfort had been designed rather than lived in. Nothing was out of place. Nothing felt personal. The apartment looked like a picture in a magazine, perfect, impressive, and empty. On the wide desk behind him lay an envelope. He had noticed it the moment he walked in. Its clean white surface marked with a hospital logo printed in calm blue ink. He had told himself he would not open it until morning. He had told himself he was tired, that bad news could wait. But the envelope sat in his thoughts like a weight. After a long moment, Tunde turned away from the window. His reflection followed him in the glass door, well-dressed, confident on the surface. He picked up the envelope and tore it open. The words inside were brief and professional, with no room for emotion. Stage to lymphoma. Immediate treatment recommended. Prognosis cautiously hopeful. Tund read the lines again and again, as if repetition might soften them. It did not. His chest tightened, and for the first time in many years, his hands shook without permission. Everything he had built his life around suddenly felt useless. His money, his influence, his security details. None of it mattered against a few typed lines on hospital paper. The awards on his shelf seemed to watch him in silence, their polished surfaces offering no comfort. He had always believed that planning could solve anything. Problems were just puzzles waiting for the right solution. But this was different. This was not a business challenge or a public crisis. This was his body reminding him that he was human, fragile, and not in control. That night, there was a soft knock at the door.
Sir.
His assistant Funny said as she stepped in, her voice careful and calm.
Sir, the chef prepared jollof rice like you requested. Dinner is served.
Thank you.
He sat at the dining table, staring at the plate in front of him. The aroma of food filled the room, but his appetite was gone. His thoughts drifted instead to a question that unsettled him. If I lose all of this, who will I be? He realized with discomfort that he did not know the answer. His days were filled with meetings, decisions, and appearances. People respected him, but did they know him? Would anyone stay if there was nothing impressive left to offer? The silence in the apartment grew heavy, pressing in on him. That night, sleep refused to come. Tund lay awake thinking not of death, but of loneliness. He imagined hospital rooms without visitors, long nights without conversations, a life reduced to medical charts and polite concern. By morning, a decision had formed quietly inside him. If his life was about to change, he needed to know something first. He needed to know whether love, kindness, and connection could exist without his name, his wealth, or his influence. He needed to know if he mattered simply as a man. Standing by the window again as dawn broke over Abuja, Tunde Adebayo made a choice that would unravel everything he thought. He knew about himself and rebuild it in ways he could not yet imagine. Tunde had always trusted structure. When life became complicated, he organized it. When fear appeared, he buried it under planning. So after the diagnosis, he did what felt natural. He researched. He read medical journals, studied treatment timelines, and memorized statistics late into the night. His laptop glowed beside his bed, filled with tabs about chemotherapy, remission rates, and survival stories. But none of it touched the heaviness in his chest. The numbers explained the illness, not the fear behind it. They did not answer the question that followed him into every quiet moment. Who will stay when I am no longer impressive? Cure or no cure, success or failure. He wanted to know if he was loved for being Tunde, not for what he owned or led. One early morning, as the city stirred below his window, Tunde reached for the small pocket Bible he had not opened in years. It had followed him from university to boardrooms, more symbol than companion. He flipped through its thin pages without direction until his eyes landed on a verse about surrender. He did not read it aloud. He simply closed his eyes. God, he whispered, unsure of the right words, to live it properly.
God, if my life is about to change, teach me how.
When he finished, the silence did not feel empty. It felt expectant. That was when the idea took shape not as courage, but as desperation. He would step away from his life as everyone knew it. Not forever, but long enough to discover the truth. He would live small, without privilege or protection. He would see who treated him with kindness. When his name meant nothing, the idea frightened him, which made it feel necessary. He would leave the penthouse and move into an ordinary neighborhood. He would dress plainly, volunteer somewhere useful, attend church without recognition, and eat where regular people ate. He would not announce his diagnosis. He wanted honest reactions, unpolished relationships, and unearned care. There was only one person he trusted enough to tell. Tunde picked up his phone and called his older sister, Kemi. She answered on the second ring.
Tunde,
She said,
you never called this early. What's wrong?
He took a breath and told her everything: the diagnosis, the fear, the plan, without pausing. When he finished, there was silence on the line. Then Kemi laughed, sharp and full of disbelief. So, she said, novel.
No way, that's impossible. Are you serious right now? This has to be a joke.
This isn't a joke.
Okay, tell me everything. I know.
She said, her tone softening.
That's why I am scared.
She asked practical questions first about treatment timelines, doctors, and test results. Then she listened as he explained his plan again. When he finished, she sighed.
Although I don't like it.
She said honestly.
Like it. If I say no, you will still do it.
Relief washed over him. I will manage the company. Kemi continued. But you will check in with me every Saturday. No excuses. If you miss a call, I will personally drag you back and shut everything down if I have to. Tund smiled for the first time in days. Deal. Be careful, she added quietly, and come back. After the call ended, Tund began preparing. The rumors would come, but he did not care. Let me be known for who I am, not what I have. And with that, he walked away from the life he had mastered toward one he had never learned how to live. Tund arrived in the older part of Abuja just before sunset. The streets were narrower, louder, and alive in a way his former neighborhood had never been. Shops spilled into the road. Children ran barefoot, laughing and shouting. The air smelled of dust, grilled meat, and fuel. This was not the Abuja he knew from tinted car windows. He parked the battered hatchback he had rented beside a small printing shop. Above it was the room he would live in, a single space with a narrow bed, a wooden chair, and a small window that faced the street. No air conditioning, no security gate, no silence. As he dropped his bag on the floor, a wave of fear passed through him. For the first time in years, no one knew where he was. No driver waited outside. No assistant checked his schedule. If something happened, he would have to handle it himself. That thought scared him, and strangely, it felt right. That night, sleep came in short pieces. Sounds rose from the street below. Music from a nearby bar. Laughter, arguments, motorcycle engines. Life pressed close, unfiltered. By morning, Tunde felt tired but alert, as if his senses had been sharpened. He started small. At a nearby community clinic, he offered to volunteer. The nurse on duty looked him up and down, unsure what to make of him. He spoke politely and said he was available to help with paperwork or guiding patients. She shrugged and handed him a stack of files. Start with these, she said, and don't disappear halfway. He did not. Days turned into a rhythm. He organized patient records, carried chairs, fetched water, and helped elderly people find their way. No one praised him. No one asked about his background. They simply accepted his help. Outside the clinic, the market became his classroom. He learned which stalls sold the best suya and which woman always overcharged strangers. He learned how people greeted each other, how jokes softened hard days, how generosity moved quietly from hand to hand. At night, he ate simple meals and read his Bible by torchlight when electricity failed. He slept with the window open, letting the city breathe around him. For the first time in a long while, his thoughts slowed. He did not tell anyone about the diagnosis. That truth stayed inside him like a quiet drumbeat. Some mornings, weakness crept into his body, reminding him that this life was temporary, but he pushed forward carefully, listening to his limits. One afternoon, as he helped an old man sit on a bench at the clinic, Tund realized something unexpected. No one here needed him to be impressive. They needed him to be present. That realization settled deeply in him. He had come to this place to test the world, to see if kindness existed without power. Instead, the world was testing him, teaching him patience, humility, and attention. As evening fell, Tunde stood outside his building and watched the market close. He no longer felt like a visitor. He felt like a man learning how to belong, and without knowing it, his life was already about to change again. Tunde first noticed the laugh before he noticed the woman. It cut through the afternoon heat of the market, clear, bright, and unforced. It was the kind of laugh that did not ask permission to exist. He looked up from the clinic doorway and saw her, weaving through the crowd with practiced ease, a wide tray balanced on her head. Steam rose from bowls of freshly fried akara, and beside them sat bottles of chilled zobo wrapped in thin plastic. She moved quickly but carefully, calling out greetings as much as prices. People responded warmly, some teasing her, others bargaining half-heartedly. She laughed with them all, never rushed, never irritated. Later that day, trouble arrived in the form of a skinny teenage boy. He darted past her and grabbed the edge of her tray. For a moment, everything tilted: food, balance, breath. Without hesitation, she chased him, shouting sharp words that quickly turned playful. The market watched, entertained. When she caught him, she scolded him loudly, retrieved her tray, and then laughed again as the crowd clapped. Tunde found himself smiling. An hour later, she appeared at the clinic entrance with a bottle of water. She handed it to the nurse, then noticed Tunde arranging files inside. "You look hungry," she said plainly, smiling. "Have you eaten?" He shook his head. Without waiting for permission, she handed him a piece of akara. When their stomachs are not angry, eat. People work better. He accepted it, surprised by how natural the exchange felt. The food was warm, filling. She sat on the low curb beside him, careful not to block the walkway. "My name is Amina," she said, still watching the flow of people. "I sell here most days." "I'm Tunde," he replied. She nodded, as if names were just labels, not identities. She did not ask where he was from, or what he did. Instead, she spoke about the market, who argued too much, who secretly helped others, who always needed credit. They talked for only a few minutes before she stood and lifted her tray again. "See you tomorrow," she said easily, as if the future had already agreed. And she was right. Amina became a familiar presence. Some days she brought food to the clinic staff. Other days she simply waved as she passed. She asked how patients were doing, especially the elderly. When supplies ran low, she quietly shared what she could. Over time, Tunde learned her story in pieces. Her father had died years earlier. Her mother taught sewing classes from their rented room. Amina worked to support the household and keep her younger brother in school. She dreamed of becoming a teacher one day. She spoke of these things without complaint or pride. They were simply facts. Tunde found himself listening more than he spoke. With Amina, there was no pressure to impress. He could be quiet. He could ask questions. He could exist. Some afternoons, they shared lunch near the clinic wall. She talked about small joys: clean water, a good sale, a customer who smiled. Tunde talked carefully, offering only fragments of his past. He said he was between things, which felt true enough. He was careful not to lean too much on her. He kept his diagnosis hidden, though. Sometimes exhaustion crept into his bones. On those days, she noticed without comment, offering soup or reminding him to rest. One evening, as the market slowed, Amina sat beside him again. "You're different from when you first came," she said casually. "How?" he asked. "You listen now," she replied. "And before, you were somewhere else." Her words stayed with him long after she left. Tunde had come to disappear, to become invisible. Instead, he was slowly being seen not for his success, but for his attention, his kindness, his willingness to stay. And for the first time since his diagnosis, the fear inside him loosened its grip. The church was 2 streets away from the clinic, tucked between a mechanic's workshop and a row of small shops. Its walls were faded, the signboards slightly crooked, but every evening the sound of singing drifted out into the street. Tunde had passed it many times before he finally stepped inside. The hall was simple wooden benches worn smooth by years of use, hymn books stacked unevenly, and a standing fan that rattled more than it cooled. Yet there was warmth in the room, the kind that came from familiarity rather than design. People greeted one another with easy smiles and called out names without hesitation. Tunde joined the choir quietly, taking a seat at the back. When they began to sing, he was surprised by how quickly his voice returned to him. His baritone blended into the harmony, steady and calm. For the first time in weeks, his chest loosened. He kept coming back. Choir rehearsals became part of his routine clinic in the morning, market afternoons, church in the evenings. The songs spoke of mercy, endurance, and hope, themes that felt uncomfortably close to his own thoughts. Still, he sang them honestly. The pastor noticed. Pastor Olu was impossible to ignore. He was tall, expressive, and dramatic in the way only someone deeply sincere could be. He laughed loudly, preached passionately, and listened with full attention. One evening after rehearsal, he handed Tunde a cup of tea and gestured for him to sit. "You sing with feeling," the pastor said, "but you are hiding." Tunde froze. "I'm not hiding," he replied carefully. Pastor Olu smiled. "People who say that usually are." They sat in silence for a moment. The fan rattled overhead. "Why are you here?" the pastor asked gently. Tunde searched for words that felt safe. "I needed somewhere quiet." "Quiet does not usually come with singing," Pastor Olu said, amused. Then his expression softened. "What are you running from, son?" The question broke something open. Tunde looked down at his hands. He had planned to protect this truth, to keep it folded neatly inside himself. But the words pushed forward before fear could stop them. "I'm sick," he said. "Cancer." The room felt suddenly smaller. Pastor Olu did not gasp or preach. He simply nodded. "And you came here to disappear," he said. "Yes, because you are afraid of being loved for the wrong reasons." Tunde looked up sharply. "How did you know?" The pastor smiled sadly. "Weakness, because I have met many strong men who are terrified of." Tunde's breath shook. He told the rest, then the diagnosis, the decision to leave his life behind, the fear of being alone. He spoke until his chest hurt and his eyes burned. When he finished, Pastor Olu stood and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You know," he said, "being small is not shameful, but shrinking alone is dangerous." He prayed then not quietly, but with firm, steady words. He prayed for strength, honesty, healing, and community. He prayed that Tunde would not confuse humility with isolation. When the prayer ended, Tunde felt lighter, as if something heavy had been named and released. "You are not alone here," Pastor Olu said. "But hiding forever is not faith, it is fear." That night, walking home through the market, Tunde understood something clearly for the first time. He did not need to disappear to be real. He needed to be known, and that truth would soon test him in ways he was not ready for. Secrets rarely stay where we put them. They seep out through pauses, through tired breaths, through the moments when the body tells a story the mouth refuses to speak. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. The sun was high, pressing down on the market with its usual insistence. Tund was helping Amina carry a heavy crate of cooking oil toward her stall. Halfway across the narrow path, his chest tightened suddenly. His breath shortened, sharp and unfamiliar. He stopped, walking, gripping the crate harder than necessary. Amina noticed immediately. "Tunde," she said, steadying the load. "What's wrong?" "I'm fine," he replied too quickly, forcing a smile that did not settle properly on his face. She studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You don't look fine." "It's nothing," he said, "just tired." They finished carrying the crate, but the moment stayed with her. Amina did not press him further. Yet later that day she returned with a small sachet of dark liquid wrapped carefully in nylon. "My mother makes this," she said. "Herbs. It helps the chest and gives strength." Tunde accepted it, the lie already heavy in his mouth. "Thank you." That night, the truth sat with him, restless. He realized how easily secrecy had shifted into dishonesty. He told himself he was protecting her, but deep down he knew another reason. He was afraid. Afraid that once the truth was spoken, the easy warmth between them would change. 2 days later, the secret broke anyway. Tunde returned to his room in the late afternoon and found his sister standing outside the printing shop, arms crossed, irritation written plainly on her face. She had exchanged her courtroom heels for flat shoes and wore the expression of someone who had already decided to win. "Tunde Adebayo," Kemi said sharply. "You don't answer your phone, so I come in person." His heart dropped. "You tracked me here?" he asked. "I tracked your silence," she replied, "and I don't like it." She followed him inside without waiting for permission. Inside the small room, she took in the narrow bed, the chair, the open window, and the absence of everything familiar. "You left your life on pause, and then you called it space. But space was never the problem. Avoidance was." Tunde walked away from everything: his work, his name, his reality. Not because he was brave, but because he was afraid of what came next. And then the truth caught up with him. Not in a hospital, not in a boardroom, but in a market, in front of someone who deserved honesty. Amina didn't react with fear. She reacted with something harder. Truth. "You should have told me. People deserve to choose how they care." In that moment, Tunde understood. Silence doesn't protect people. It only delays trust. So he went back. Back to the hospital. Back to the diagnosis. Back to the fear he had been running from. And this time, there was no hiding. The treatment stripped him down. His strength, his control, his independence. He became what he feared most. Visible, weak, human. But something unexpected happened. People showed up. Not the powerful, not the important, but the real. And in that quiet room, Tund learned a different kind of strength. Not the strength to stand alone, but the strength to be seen. Then the world found him. A single photo turned his private battle into public conversation. His pain became a story. Some people praised him, others questioned him. Was this real or performance? But the hardest part wasn't the noise. It was the truth behind it. Because intention does not erase impact. And healing was no longer just about survival. It was about responsibility. So he stepped forward, not to defend himself, but to be honest. I was afraid, he said. And for the first time, he stopped trying to control how he was seen. But truth alone wasn't enough. Don't step back, Amina told him. Step correctly, not with words, but with action. So he stayed, through the doubt, through the discomfort of being fully known. And slowly, things changed. Not dramatically, but quietly. Healing came, not as a miracle, but as progress, measured, real. And with it came clarity. This was never just about him. So he built something new. Not a brand, not a performance, but something real. Something that listened, that supported, that gave without turning people into stories. And he named it after the one who taught him the truth he needed most. Not about survival, but about presence. Life didn't become perfect. It became honest. And in that honesty, something deeper grew. Not success, not reputation, but belonging. Years later, the work continued. Lives changed. Communities grew. Not because of one man, but because he chose to stay. And in the middle of it all, Tunde understood. Being known is harder than disappearing, but it is where healing begins. He was no longer defined by what he built or what he ran from, but by what he chose to face and what he chose to give back. He was known, he was healed, and most importantly, he stayed.